Hi, this is the third video in the second module of my foundation course for property investors. And in this video we're going to look at due diligence, both location due diligence and property due diligence. Now, due diligence is a big subject and requires more than just one or two 10-15-minute videos. And therefore there is an online course devoted to location and property due diligence. And wherever I've got a second course which spends much more time on the subject, the name of the course appears in the bottom right hand corner of your screen. But I will try and cover as much as I can, or I will cover as much as I can about due diligence in 10 to 15 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes. I can't stress the importance of location due diligence. Successful investors know their locations backwards. They know every street in the location and what works in those streets. And not just streets, but streets can change. There can be a difference between one end of a street and the other. And they don't have to be very long streets for there to be a difference. I'm not talking about sort of 5-mile or 1-mile streets. I'm talking about streets that can be 500 meters long, 500 yards, 500 meters long. Now, your due diligence can split between online activities and on-location activities. And really, you should be carrying out a lot of online activities before you go to the location. You should really have tried to prove that the location is potentially good, so you don't waste your time in driving to the location or traveling to the location, and you don't waste money traveling to the location. You should do a lot of online work before you get in the car or get on the train or however you intend to get to the location. Within your location due diligence, you should be able to find suitable locations and start defining neighborhoods in both Rightmove and Google. Now, when we looked at location due diligence, we found it very difficult to define a location. Try it yourself. You obviously live in a location. Try and define it for the benefit of somebody who's not familiar with it. It's very difficult. What are the boundaries of a location? How do you define the boundaries? And I spent a considerable amount of time looking at how to define a location for the purposes of other property investors. I even looked at electoral wards, but that was a complete and utter nightmare. They had the strangest boundaries you'll ever come across. We don't live in locations, though. We don't have locationers living next door. We actually live in neighborhoods, and we have neighbors. And hence we sort of zeroed in on the concept of subdividing a location into neighbors, or neighborhoods rather. Now, the moment you start talking about neighborhoods, anybody else will understand what you're talking about, and that really applies to anywhere in the world, because it's a commonly used phrase, certainly in the English language. So if I say to you, just describe your neighborhood, you will immediately visualize an area around your home. Now, that area may be a few hundred yards. It could be up to maybe 500 meters, but it is a definable area, and you will know about your neighborhood, and you'll know a lot about your neighborhood, whilst you may not know a great deal about the location in which your neighborhood sits. And on Rightmove, you're able to take a postcode, the postcode of your home, and look at the neighborhood around your home out to either a quarter of a mile. First of all, you can look at the immediate neighborhood, then you can go to a quarter mile, and then you can go to half a mile. So you're able to define the neighborhood in another media or medium, which is Rightmove. Now, with Rightmove, what you can't do is take the little man, which you've got in Google, and drop him into your street and walk around. And that's another way of carrying out location due diligence online, to look at the neighborhood and the location in Rightmove and Google. You should also be checking prices, rents and statistics, and there are three good websites that you can use for that. One is Mouse Price, where you can look at the history of the street and get some idea of values. The second is Zoopla, which provides similar information. And the third, believe it or not, is BBC house prices. If you go onto the BBC site and put in house prices, they draw figures from the Land Registry which will tell you what the movement is in house prices by type of property in a location. And that is very, very useful. Also, you should be looking at the local authority housing plan. Virtually every local authority has a housing plan, and you can look at this free of charge online. And also with the local authority, if you're thinking about getting involved in HMO, houses multiple occupation, multi-lets, you should look at the HMO regs online, because they do differ from one local authority to another. There is no commonality. There is in Scotland, but not in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And also you should look at any university, any within the location, you should look at their housing policy, assuming that they have one. If they have one, they will publicise it on their site. So those are 3 points that you can check online: local authority housing plan, HMO regulations, and the university housing policy. You should also look at or try to find local agents and see what they're selling and whether they've got any possible deals. And this is reasonably easy to do. And finally, you should look to see whether there's likely to be the closure of any of your customer sources, tenant and buyer. Notice I've put tenant and buyer, not or buyer, because both these people will be your customer. You will start off with your tenant as a customer, but at some point in time you will have a buyer as a customer when you decide to sell your property. Now, what do I mean by a customer source? A hospital, a university, a factory. These are sources of customers or potential customers. And you need to know whether there's likely to be the closure of any of these sources within the next 5 to 10 years. Because if there is, it could affect, or badly affect, detrimentally affect your strategy. Some years ago, or many years ago, in Oxford, a hospital was closed down called the John Radcliffe, and it was moved about 2 miles across Oxford from a place called Jericho, which was close to the centre of Oxford, to Headington or to Marston. And the result was that Jericho virtually died on its feet, and it took 20 years for it to recover. Now it's a very bijou area and very expensive. But for about 20 years, it lost its main source of customers, both tenants and owners. So you need to be certain that there's longevity in your customer source. Now we come to the on-location activities. And you must go to the location. The moment you feel that a location is going to work for you and your strategy, and remember, your strategy is personal to you, it's not common to everybody, you must get in the car or train or whatever and go to the location. And when I say go to the location, you need to go to the neighbourhood as well, and get out and walk the streets. Now, quite obviously, you can't walk all the streets in a location to start with, but you can walk the streets in a neighbourhood. Get out and walk the streets, smell the streets. Speak with the locals. They have all the information, all the knowledge about the neighbourhood that you're thinking of investing in. I do location days with students, and I go to their location where they're wanting to invest and literally walk the streets and stop outside houses. If we see a house which is up for sale, we'll stop outside the house and stand outside the neighbouring house, the next door house, and hopefully get the owner to come out. I'm not going to knock on the door and say, "Can I talk to you?" I want them to come out and talk to me. And invariably they do. And then we start talking about the neighbourhood. And on many occasions I've had the neighbour of the house I'm interested in take me on a guided tour of the neighbourhood and explain who lives here and who lives there. I remember on one occasion we were walking up a street and the lady said that at one end of the street lived criminals and they were inside at the moment, but when they got out all hell let loose. So do talk with the locals and obviously the agents, but the locals are a far better source of what's happening on the street than the agents. And finally, go to local network meetings. There you will meet people who know about the location and possibly the neighbourhoods. And these location network meetings, the local network meetings, will be well advertised on the internet, Facebook and places like that. And there you will meet other landlords and other people who are thinking about investing and get a general feeling as to what is going on in that particular location and neighbourhood. And until you actually get in your car, for the online activities you will have spent nothing. It's only when you get in your car will you start to spend money. The online activities will take time, obviously, but it's when you get in the car down here that you'll actually start to spend money. Okay, that brings me to the end of this video. I could go on a lot longer, but it could take hours. So what I suggest you do is, if you want any further information on location due diligence, you need to go on to, or you need to sign up for, our online due diligence course. Thank you for listening and watching. I hope you found it interesting. Any queries, please give me a call. Thank you.